It started with a sound, a soft creak beneath the floorboards. My little sister thought it was just the pipes. But the next morning, there was a door down there. A door that wasn't there yesterday. Old wood, iron handle, no frame, no hinges. Just standing in the middle of the basement wall like it had been waiting for us. We should have left it shut, but we didn't. And now, I don't think the door ever wanted to stay closed. The morning we found the door, the air in the basement felt wrong. It was colder than usual, dense, like it was holding its breath. My sister, Emma, had been looking for her old dollhouse when she called me down. "Tyler," she said softly, pointing at the far wall. "That wasn't there yesterday." At first, I thought she was messing with me again. But then I saw it, an old wooden door where the wall used to be plain concrete. The light bulb above us flickered as if the air itself didn't want us to see it clearly. The door didn't belong there. It looked ancient. Gray wood cracked like dry skin, an iron handle corroded and spotted with rust. No frame, no seams, just part of the wall. I ran my hand over it, expecting to feel something solid behind it, but it was cold and hollow, like there was space beyond it, space that shouldn't exist. Emma stood behind me clutching her doll, her voice trembling. "Did Mom put it there?" she asked. I almost laughed, but the sound died in my throat. The wall had no marks of construction, no dust, no damage, no tools lying around. It was just there, perfectly fitted, waiting. We both heard it then, a faint scratching from the other side. At first, it was soft like nails against wood. Then it grew louder, frantic, desperate. Emma screamed and hid behind me. My pulse hammered in my ears. I backed away slowly, but something in me wanted to open it. I can't explain why. It felt like the door was whispering, not with sound, but inside my head, urging me closer, telling me that what was behind it was important. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house made me flinch. Around 2 a.m., I heard the basement door creak open from downstairs. I froze in bed. I could hear Emma's small footsteps on the floorboards, followed by the soft squeal of the basement hinges. "Emma," I whispered, but there was no reply. I threw off my blanket and ran downstairs, my heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. The light in the basement was on, flickering. Emma was standing in front of the door again, barefoot, her eyes wide and glassy like she was sleepwalking. "It's calling me," she said, voice flat, almost not hers. I shouted her name, but she didn't move. She reached for the handle. I lunged forward and grabbed her hand just as her fingers brushed the metal. It burned her. She screamed and fell backward, clutching her hand. There was a small mark on her palm, like the outline of a key. I turned back toward the door. The scratching had stopped. Everything was silent again. But the bulb above us swung slightly, though no one had touched it. I could swear, just for a moment, I heard a whisper from behind the door say my name, and that's when I realized it wasn't just a door. It was waiting for one of us to open it. By morning, Emma's hand had turned pale around the burn. The faint outline of a key was now darker, almost carved into her skin like it was sinking deeper. Mom thought it was an allergic reaction. She dabbed ointment on it and told us to stay out of the basement, but even she didn't sound sure. I noticed she wouldn't look at the door when she walked past the basement steps. Like she felt it too, the wrongness coming from beneath us. That day dragged on like a fog. Emma didn't talk much. She kept staring at her hand, tracing the mark over and over, whispering things I couldn't hear. At one point, I caught her drawing something on the kitchen table. A crooked shape, almost like a door, surrounded by jagged lines. When I asked what it was, she looked up with those faraway eyes and said, "It wants me to find the key." Her voice was quiet, empty, like she was repeating someone else's words. That night, I couldn't help it. I had to go back downstairs. I brought a flashlight this time. The basement was colder than it should have been. The light from the bulb swung slightly even though there was no draft. The door looked different. The wood had darkened, damp and breathing, like the veins of something alive. When I shined the flashlight closer, I noticed new scratches on the surface, deep ones that formed letters. I could barely make them out, but they spelled, "Let me out." A noise behind me made me jump, soft footsteps on the stairs. Emma stood there in her nightgown, her burned hand held against her chest. Her eyes weren't normal. They looked clouded, unfocused, as if she were staring through me. "It's not bad," she whispered. "It just wants to come through." Before I could stop her, she stepped past me and touched the door again. The second her palm met the wood, every light in the basement exploded. Bulb, flashlight, everything. We were thrown into blackness. I could hear her breathing, fast, uneven. Then, a whisper, low and rasping, coming from both sides of the door at once. "You opened it." The floor vibrated like something heavy was moving behind the wall. I grabbed Emma and pulled her away, but she was stiff, frozen. A crack appeared along the edge of the door, light leaking out from inside. Not white light, something murky and pulsing, like blood seen through water. I dragged her up the stairs, slammed the basement door shut, and pressed my ear against it. Silence, then a soft knock. Once, twice, 3 times. We didn't go back down that night. When I checked Emma's hand the next morning, the mark wasn't just darker. It had changed shape. It now looked like a keyhole. By the 3rd day, Emma wasn't the same. She moved slower, spoke less, and sometimes just stood near the basement door as if waiting for it to speak. Mom noticed too, though she tried to pretend everything was fine. But there was fear in her eyes. Sharp, quiet fear she tried to hide from us. She told me to keep Emma upstairs, but Emma kept slipping away. Every time I found her, she was closer to that door. I started hearing things too. Faint whispers crawling through the air vents late at night. Sometimes they sounded like Emma's voice calling my name. Other times it was lower, something wrong. It spoke words I couldn't understand, wet and heavy, like someone whispering underwater. The nights stretched longer. The whole house began to feel colder, and shadows lingered longer in the corners. One evening, while Mom was at work, I caught Emma standing in front of the basement door again, whispering. I didn't even hear her go down there. Her burned hand was pressed flat against the wood, her lips moving silently. I grabbed her shoulder. She turned toward me, slowly, and smiled, but not like my sister. Her eyes were all wrong, wide and dark, her pupils swallowing the light. "He says you shouldn't interrupt," she said in a voice too calm, too old. I dragged her upstairs and locked the basement door. She didn't fight me. She just kept smiling, tilting her head like she was listening to something far away. That night, she didn't sleep. I heard her pacing in her room, whispering to the darkness. Around midnight, the house began to shake again, just slightly, like something big was moving underneath. The picture frames rattled on the walls. The power flickered, and from the basement came that sound again. Knock, knock, knock. I sat on the stairs, heart hammering, too scared to move. The air smelled different now, damp, metallic, like rust and old dirt. And through the knocking, I heard my name again. Tyler. It was Emma's voice, except Emma was upstairs, pacing, humming to herself. I pressed my ear to the door. The whisper came again, closer this time. "She's almost ready. You opened it. Now let her finish." My breath caught in my throat. I ran upstairs to check on Emma, but when I pushed open her door, the bed was empty. The window was open. The curtains were swaying in the cold night air. A thin trail of dirt led from the window to the hallway. I followed it, trembling. It stopped at the top of the basement stairs. The door was open. The light flickered below, faint and pulsing. I could hear her voice echoing from the darkness. Low, chanting, the same words over and over. "Find the key, open the way." My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I called her name, but she didn't answer. Something down there was breathing, slow and deep, like the sound of the earth itself shifting. And then I saw it, the faint glow from her hand, lighting the steps below. She wasn't just talking to the thing behind the door anymore. She was inviting it in. I crept halfway down the stairs before I saw her. Emma was standing in front of the basement door again, but the wood didn't look the same. It was no longer still, it was breathing. The entire surface swelled and contracted like the chest of something alive. The veins of black rot pulsed beneath the grain, spreading with each flicker of the light bulb. Emma's glowing hand hovered inches above it, trembling. "Emma," I whispered, but she didn't turn. She was whispering in that strange, rhythmic tone, her voice blending with something deeper. Another voice that came from behind the door, male, rasping, layered, as if it had been speaking for centuries. "It said it needs the key," she murmured. "It said the door is hungry." I took a step closer. The air grew heavier, pressing against my chest. Every breath burned with the smell of wet earth and decay. "Emma, stop!" I shouted. She flinched, and for a brief moment, I saw fear flicker in her eyes. Then she smiled, too wide, unnatural, and slammed her palm against the door. A sound burst through the air like thunder underwater. The basement lights shattered, and the wood split down the middle, spilling a dark red glow that washed over the walls. I felt my body jerk backward as a gust of freezing air slammed into me. Emma was screaming, but not in pain. It sounded more like relief. The door began to open on its own. The crack widened, and from inside came a low growl that made the concrete tremble. I saw something move, a shadow, tall and thin, dragging along the edges of the frame like liquid smoke. His fingers curled around the door, impossibly long, jointed wrong. The air hummed with a deep, sick vibration that made my teeth ache. I ran toward Emma, grabbed her arm, and pulled with everything I had. For a second, she resisted. Then she collapsed against me, crying, the glow on her hand fading. The red light dimmed, the shadow pulling back like smoke into darkness. The door slammed shut with a sound that shook dust from the ceiling. I dragged her up the stairs and slammed the basement door behind us. We both fell against the hallway floor, gasping. She clutched her hand, tears streaking her face. "It's still hungry," she whispered, trembling. "It's not done yet." That night, Mom came home to find us shaking in the corner. She thought we'd imagined it, said maybe it was gas fumes or a bad dream. But the next morning, when we woke up, the basement door at the top of the stairs was open. Not the one in the basement, the one leading to it. Mom swore she locked it, but there it was, swinging gently, creaking in the quiet house. And when I looked down the steps, I saw something that froze my blood. The old wooden door at the bottom wasn't closed anymore. It was gone. By morning, the basement was empty. The door, the ancient, wrong piece of wood that had no reason to exist, was gone. But the wall behind it wasn't the same. It looked soft, like the paint was breathing. The concrete pulsed under the light, slow and steady, as if it had a heartbeat. Emma refused to go near it. She sat at the top of the stairs, knees pulled to her chest, whispering that the door hadn't really disappeared. It had just moved. I didn't understand what she meant until later that day. I was in my room when I heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. It wasn't coming from the basement anymore. It was coming from inside the wall behind my bed. I pressed my ear to the plaster, barely breathing. The knock came again, followed by a low voice, distant but clear enough to make my stomach twist. "You opened it. Now let me in." I stumbled backward, heart pounding. Emma screamed from the hallway, and I rushed out. She was standing at her bedroom door, staring at the wall opposite her bed. There, carved into the wallpaper, was a new outline, a rectangle, the faint shape of a door. "It's moving through the house," she said, voice breaking. "It's looking for a way out." The rest of the day was a blur. Mom tried to calm us down, insisting it was just our imagination. But when she went to call someone for help, the phone lines were dead. Even the cell signals were gone. Every room in the house felt colder, darker, as if the sun outside couldn't reach through the walls anymore. That night, none of us slept. The knocking traveled from room to room, slow and patient. At one point, it stopped outside my door. I could see the shadow under the crack. Long, thin, like someone standing there waiting. I held my breath until the footsteps moved away. Around 3 in the morning, the house started breathing. The walls expanded and contracted in rhythm, and a low hum filled the air, vibrating through the floorboards. Emma was sitting by the window, whispering again. "It's already inside," she said. "It just needs to choose." I didn't know what she meant until the floor beneath her began to darken, like ink spreading through paper. A black stain crept across the carpet, rising like smoke. From within it came the same red glow I'd seen behind the door. I grabbed her hand and pulled her away just as the stain stretched upward, forming the faint silhouette of a figure. No features, just darkness with shape. The whisper returned, louder now, echoing through the whole house. "Let me through." The walls shuddered, the pictures fell, the lights flickered out. For a split second, I thought the house itself might collapse, but then it stopped. Total silence. When the lights flickered back on, the black stain was gone. But so was Mom. The silence after Mom disappeared was worse than any scream. The house felt hollow, drained of sound. Even the ticking clock in the hallway had stopped. Emma sat on the couch, trembling, clutching the burned mark on her hand. "It took her," she whispered. "The house took her." Her voice cracked like dry paper. I didn't want to believe it, but I could feel it. The air still pulsed faintly, like a dying heartbeat echoing from the walls. We tore through every room, calling for Mom, opening closets, checking outside. But the world beyond the windows wasn't right. The sky looked dimmer, the light slightly red, as though everything had been filtered through blood. When I stepped outside, the sound died instantly. No wind, no birds, just an endless, heavy stillness. It was as if the whole neighborhood had stopped existing the moment the door disappeared. I dragged Emma back inside. The house groaned beneath us, the floors rippling underfoot. The faint outline of a new door had appeared on the living room wall. Taller, darker, breathing more violently than before. It looked like the same door from the basement, only now the wood seemed alive, crawling with veins. "It's her," Emma said suddenly. "Mom's behind it. She's calling me." Before I could stop her, Emma pressed her glowing hand to the wood. The mark flared bright red, and a voice, Mom's voice, echoed faintly from the other side. "Help me," it cried. My heart nearly stopped. "Emma, wait!" I pulled her back, but the handle turned by itself. A blast of freezing air rushed out, carrying whispers that didn't belong in this world. Inside the door wasn't darkness anymore. It was a place, a hallway of floating shadows and endless whispers, walls made of moving shapes, and a faint figure struggling in the distance. I recognized her. Mom. Her hands reached toward us, but something was holding her back. Behind her, the tall shadow moved, the one I'd seen in the basement. It stepped closer, its body shifting like smoke, its face a hollow void. Emma screamed and tried to run to her, but I held on tight. "It's not her," I shouted, but she didn't listen. She slipped free and ran straight into the doorway. For a moment, she was surrounded by that red light, her body suspended as if caught between worlds. She turned to me, eyes wide, tears running down her cheeks. "Close it," she whispered, "before it finds you." The shadow reached for her. She vanished. The door slammed shut, throwing me backward. Every window shattered, the lights exploded, and the house went still. When I woke up, it was morning. The wall where the door had been was solid again. No mark, no sign it had ever existed. The house was silent, empty. Now, years later, I still live here, alone. I've tried to leave, but every time I pack, the knocking starts again. Always from a different wall. Always patient. Always waiting. Sometimes, late at night, I hear Emma's voice behind it, whispering my name. And sometimes, I whisper back,